Eagles. Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to Birds 365, a Monday edition, overreaction Monday edition after the Eagles fall to 2-2 off a crushing loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and did not look pretty doing it. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Monday morning, man?
I'm doing well. Better than most Eagles fans, I would imagine.
Yeah, Eagles Nation taking this loss hard. You know, I think about this loss, and we'll get into it, obviously, and I want to welcome everybody in. And first, before I do that, I want to thank BetUS, our exclusive sponsor of today's show for the 2-hour program. So thank you to BetUS for sponsoring the show. But I think, John, the reason that this loss hurts so bad, I mean, if you zoom out, you're like, hey, you're missing AJ, Devontae, and Lane. I mean,
yeah, that's it. Zoom out.
You're going to lose.
Out.
Your chances at winning are severely diminished when you lose those three players. I think it was the way in which this team lost that leaves fans very upset. And part of me really understands it. I mean, you spend money to go down there, and the team they laid a goose egg, John. They showed up unprepared. Yeah. I mean, they were down 24-0 in the blink of an eye, and it really
They were down 255 to nothing in total yardage.
I mean, it was a bad start.
Deep into the second quarter. Yeah, it's bad. I get you. The style points are bad on top of it. But at the end of the day, what I wrote is respect the talent, because in a weird way, I don't think Eagles fans do in a lot of circumstances and think you can just insert name and scheme it up. And I talked about it all off season with all this bullshit with Kellen Moore he's going to scheme it up. No, he's not. Respect the talent, and things go back to. And by the way, that's not a criticism of Kellen Moore. When you lose A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Lane Johnson, Ed Kratz and I had him as 1, 2, 3. A.J., Lane, and Devontae in that order is the best pure football players on this team. Guess what? You're not going to be as good. Should it have been better? Yes, you shouldn't start 255 to nothing and 24 to nothing and be completely run off the field. Like that, but at least they showed a little bit of perseverance. They got things going. I thought, hey, maybe they're back in the game 24-14. They got a chance to get off the field a couple times. They weren't able to do it from a defensive perspective. There's also the fact that was a weather game, and I think people don't think of they think of weather games like Green Bay in January or the Ice Bowl because that's football, right? Guess what? Mid-90s, 110 on the field. That's a weather game. And Tampa Bay's more used to it than Philadelphia, just like.
Well, that's obvious. But here's my pushback. Didn't Denver go in there last week and beat up on that team?
It wasn't like that. Weather-wise, it doesn't snow. It doesn't snow every day in Green Bay. But when it does in January and when it's -15, it's not like that every day in Florida.
No, I know, but and I'm sure you have. You've been to Florida in September. It's hot, John.
Yeah. Now it's always hot, but there's a difference between regular Tampa hot and what was going on yesterday. It's not an excuse. It's just they're better prepared. They're more used to it, just like Green Bay's more used to it. In January, the cold weather. I don't know why anybody, it should be that a surprise for people, but you talk about go all the way back to one of the most hated games in Eagles history when Tampa Bay, the Joe Jurabishus game, the whole thing was Tampa Bay was they could not win a game in their entire history when it was under whatever it was, 40 degrees. They never won. And they eventually did win. But, it was a weather game, and they were going down like flies, and they were not prepared for it. And people can talk, and I hear a bunch of old school guys who played saying, "In my day, blah blah blah." Well, guess what? They collectively, but your day doesn't matter because they can't do 2-a-days. They can't prepare these guys and run them into the ground and be. All you can do is use the time allotted. So unless you can start at that point. I don't want to hear about when you played. It's not relevance.
A lot of our great listeners here, Johnny Mac, are checking in. A couple of them were down at the game. A bunch of them live in Florida. We do have a big listening base in Florida. They are saying very hot down there right now, no doubt. Look, I get it. I don't want to make that much of an excuse out of that, but
Well,
I
I'm
do
just saying
see
it was a weather game. I'm not.
impact,
No excuse. Both teams played in front. I'm saying for whatever reason, people understand Green Bay in January is a weather game. They don't understand Tampa or Miami on a day like that is a weather game. I saw it up live when the Dolphins for a joint practice with the Eagles a couple years ago, and it was a big joke at the time. Nobody cares about practice, but our buddy Elliot Shore Parks would declare the Eagles practice champions, and they were undefeated in joint practices. That was the joke. And it was a brutal day down there, Zander. Brutal. I mean, heat, humidity, and the Dolphins have this beautiful new facility, and they're sitting there getting ready for practice in the air-conditioned indoor, and the Eagles are out stretching in the heat
right?
and the humidity. And in a practice setting, they got waxed. I mean, they got waxed by the Miami Dolphins.
No, there's no doubt, especially for a team like you mentioned, John. I mean, they live there. That's where that's where they're from. Obviously, that's where all of them live right now, and they play out most of their games there. So I do get that perspective, John. Let me ask you about the quarterback, because there's a lot of talk about Jaylen Hurts, more than I expected coming out of that game. Like, I had a lot of problems with that game, and I didn't think Jaylen Hurts was great, but it wasn't really anything I didn't know about Jaylen. I mean, he struggles to elevate when his best players aren't out there. I've that's been a theme with Jaylen. We talk about it when AJ Brown's out. There's a lot of talk right now about Jaylen Hurts. I mean, there's a lot of talk on our channel, and maybe JAKIB Nation's not a good encaps a whole look at the Eagles fan base, but we got a lot of fans. We got a lot of Eagles fans that watch our network. I mean, we get a couple thousands of them, per hit. We get over 250,000 unique fans in the last 28 days. There's a lot of Hurts commentary out there. Your thoughts on Jaylen Hurts coming out of that game is, are we learning more about Jaylen? Are we starting to wonder, how good of a player he is and how far we can go with him at the helm?
I think it's fair. I think it's very fair to criticize. It was disappointing. I think you see some of the same stuff you've seen, and that's my concern. It's a good player. There's a lot of things he does very well, but I think you see a little bit of stagnation in his game from the standpoint of, anticipatory throws. There's a lot of, especially in college football, turn on every Saturday if you can get through it. It's a bad product, but there's a lot of throwing to open receivers. So, those windows close at the NFL level, and you have to throw guys open at times. You have to be more anticipatory. There's timing routes, or there should be timing routes. And the back foot's got to hit the ground. The ball's got to come out. You're not good at that stuff. And that's fine when he's younger, but now that he's played quite a bit, you'd like to see more improvement with that kind of stuff. Yeah, he was up against it, but, for many years, you see certain quarterbacks that, it's certainly not going to be the same, but you can get a little bit more out of your backup players. So I think that's fair. But he's the quarterback, and he's probably going to take more hits than he should today, just like the coach is. And that's part of it. Nick talks about it all the time. The coach and quarterback, they're going to get too much credit when they win, and they're going to get too much blame when they lose. And that's going to be the case on this overreaction Monday. But yeah, you can criticize him. I mean, I'd appreciate an apology for yelling at me for criticizing when he deserves criticism. Now you want to criticize him. And I'm joking. But yeah, it's fair. It's always fair to criticize the quarterback. Always.
Yeah, I think people are having the come to Jesus conversation of, look, I mean, we thought he was elite. He was a top paid guy for a hot week and whatever it was. And he took us to the Super Bowl. And, a lot of people continue to die on the Jaylen is elite hill. And He's just proving he's not. He's a good player. I'm not saying he's not a good
player. He's a
player.
very good player.
Very good player.
And by the way, that's the silver lining here. Everybody's going to be back for Cleveland. And by everybody, I mean AJ, Devontae, and Lane. And it's going to be a different team out there. So, and that's where I say respect the talent and respect what wasn't on the field. And you know, that's where the fan base, if they expected more, now you can expect more than 255 to nothing. You can certainly expect more, but to think that they were just going to roll into Tampa Bay against a good team, not a great team, but a good team, coming off a bad loss. I mentioned all last week, I hated the spot in general. And I would have hated the spot even if they had those guys, to be honest. Would have been a much more competitive game, but I still hated the spot on the schedule because what happened with Tampa Bay. Yeah, it was, the loss was predictable, but I get your point about the style. The style points are even worse than expected.
Much worse.
And look, it doesn't matter, style points, but I get why people are upset by it.
No doubt. John, your thoughts on the turnovers? I think that's the other big thing on Jaylen Hurts right
Yeah,
now.
I saw a lot. Nick gave him a pass on the fumble. I saw a lot of people giving him a pass. I don't give him a pass on the fumble.
I don't give him a pass on that fumble at all. I saw that as well. I mean, a lot of people giving him.
I'm like, you got to be aware. I mean, the guy's not just because the guy goes behind you, that doesn't mean he stops. You know, and especially a player of that caliber, you got to be a little bit more aware of that. And you know, it's not the most egregious of his turnover. Still, the most egregious is throwing across his body against Green Bay.
Yeah,
in the end zone. That's the most egregious. When there were certain people that gave him a pass for that.
Oh.
Most didn't. Certainly in the building, they didn't. But I heard far too much. It wasn't. You know, he was a tick away from getting it out to Grand Calcaterra. Looked like he had a little bit of space, but whatever. That's bad. You don't just always behind me. You saw that a lot with Carson Wentz. Where
that's where I was going. I mean, and you heard, but I'm sure you saw on social media everybody talking about Carson Wentz-esque. I mean, it really was.
Yeah, Carson would hold on to the ball too long. Guy would go around him, come back, get him from behind, and there was it was very yeah. I mean, I don't pay much attention to that kind of stuff, but yeah, I get why people went there. That's where I went, and it was very, you know, you have to be more aware. You have to have a better pocket presence, and the sacks as well. A lot of pocket presence issues.
Yeah.
Now, you know, when I watch the all 22, I'm sure the receivers aren't getting open. I knew that before the game. But still, as a quarterback, and I talked about this with Frank Reich, who was honest about it back in the day. I mean, sometimes on a particular day, if you're an NFL quarterback, the offensive line might not be playing well. You know, you might be down a couple receivers, and the guys aren't getting separation. You got to find out a way to speed things up. You got to find out a way to get the ball to people, even if it's dumping it off, which we know is not a strength of this team. You got to find a way to figure it out and at least elevate some certain guys. And he's not that guy at this point. And there's no real evidence to point that he's going to be that guy. And by the way, you don't want evidence because you don't want to sit through numerous games with Paris Campbell as your best receiver. You know, and you want AJ and Devontae. And by the way, when they do get back, it's going to mask a lot of these issues. And
Yeah,
people are going to be happy again.
That's part of the worry as well.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a worry because they're going to be good. It's just a matter of how good, but they're going to mask a lot of the issues. And you have to, and that's why I say respect the talent, because God forbid something happens to him again, you're going to be in the same boat.
We had John, I do the post game show coming off our show last night. We did a 90-minute show. You were on for the first hour and change, about an hour and 10. And I brought on some of our fans, some of the Eagles fans, some of JAKIB Nation. And they're great. They're it's great to talk to them. I like to get a pulse on some of the what other people are thinking. You know, one of the first guys I had on, he says, Jaylen Hurts is bum juice. That's the
Bum
word he
juice?
used. Bum juice. That's what he said it 4 or 5 times. I'm like, oh my
I don't know
lord.
what that means, but there's a
It means
lot.
not good, Johnny
Well,
Mac. It means,
yeah, I get that part. But there's a lot of quarterbacks worse than Jalen Hurts.
no, I know that. But did
I
you also
mean,
see that clip floating around of his 2020 highlights where he's literally just running all over the field. He's torching teams with his legs. He looks like a different player in the clip.
yeah, he doesn't look as athletic as he did early in his career. Maybe that's just the
Yeah, I think that's
accumulation of
also part
hits.
of why he's not been a great player or not an elite player
Nah,
anymore. It's because he doesn't have that.
that doesn't speak to the pocket press. Like you have to. That's going to happen to everybody. You see right now, Jaden Daniels is you know the talk of the league, right? Look, the way he plays, he's going to get banged up at some point. They went through this with RG3. I think people forget RG3 was phenomenal as a rookie and hurt his knee in the playoff game, and that was it. And I hope that doesn't happen with Jaden Daniels because people that watch this show
Yeah,
know
no,
I said he should be the number 1 overall pick. He was the best quarterback. He was much better
yeah.
than Caden.
Well, forget about the league talking about him for a second, John. They're the number 1 team in the
Yeah.
NFC East right now.
Yeah, and he's doing a phenomenal. He's tough to deal with. He is really tough to deal with. But he plays a style where he's going to get hit if he continues to play that style. And even if you're playing like Jalen Hurts has had incredible durability for the most part, you've seen it when he got hurt in Chicago. Had to miss a few games that time, but you've seen it when he's hurt his ankle, and he's still playing, but he's not as effective. And that will happen to Jaden Daniels as well at some point, hopefully. He's able to persevere with the other stuff. And the other stuff is more important to me when it comes to the pocket presence, the early flushing of the pocket, the he doesn't climb the pocket as much, the anticipatory throws, throwing guys open, timing routes, things like that. That needs to be elevated. And I don't see the elevation to where you want it at this stage, or the improvement where you want it at this particular stage. But he's still a good player, still a really good player. And he's still tough to deal with. And that's what I was hoping for in yesterday's game when they cut it to 24-14. I always say, no matter how poorly Jalen is playing on a normal game day, you got to play for 60 minutes, even if he doesn't have his fastball, his ace stuff. If you want to make the baseball analogy, you got to play for 60 minutes. Tampa really didn't have to play for 60 minutes. They had to play for 22 minutes, and the game was out of reach.
24-0, and it should have been 28-0. Baker Mayfield put the ball right on the
drop
money,
pass,
and it was a drop pass. Yeah, really should.
Now they cut it to Saquon had the big play, and they cut it to 24-14 early in the second half, and he thought maybe there was a little bit of a moment, but the defense, we got to get to the defense too, because that is an abject disaster.
Let's go there real quick. Just your thoughts on their performance yesterday. It wasn't pretty.
Yeah, they went back to their typical way of playing defense, and it hasn't been pretty, especially when the nickel's on the field and they have the 4-man front and the nickel. They just been bad. Couple, things hide it. They've been able to get off the field on third downs, the red zone defense, a little bit masking some of how bad they've been in a general sense. That sort of escaped when they had a chance to get off the field, as I mentioned, cut it to 24-14. They had a 3rd and 7 and a 3rd and 11 on Tampa's next drive, which Tampa ended up scoring. On the first set of downs, they had a 3rd and 7. They let Mayfield get loose for a 10-yard scramble for a first down. And then even after that, they had him at 3rd and 11. And you say, all right, here we go. Here's Big Manjo. Get him off the field. who knows? He might turn it into a game. And I think it was Chris Godwin who had a 14, 15-yard catch on
Yeah.
Isaiah Rodgers. So
Was that the one that Baker Mayfield was rolling to the right?
I haven't looked at it again.
That was a tremendous play by Baker as well. Great catch by Godwin.
And Godwin's having a great season, but still 3rd and 11. Bottom line, get off the field.
Gotta get off the
find
field.
a way to get off the field, and you might get back in the game because at that point, and I used the Vikings Green Bay game. I mean, the Vikings had a 28-point lead in that game. And when the snowball starts going the other way, and it started going the other way for Green Bay, all of a sudden the team that had the big lead is the one that gets tight because they're like, oh boy, we're blowing this. And I think the Eagles were in a position to put that doubt in Tampa Bay's mind, and they weren't able to do it. The defense was just terrible. Terrible.
John,
everything about it.
I'm gonna say this is gonna be right now my statement through 4 weeks of the year on that defensive line. Brandon Graham is the best player on our defensive line, and I'll tell you why. Because when you have a guy that's as talented as Jalen Carter, but you wake up and it's like, oh, I hope we get the good Jalen Carter today, and I hope we get Jordan Davis that shows up today. How do you rely on players like that? How do you build a defense around guys that are so inconsistent? Show up not just show up, dominate 1 week, and then do nothing the next week.
No, I'm with you. I agree.
I mean, Brandon Graham, at least I know what I'm getting every week. Every single week, I know what Brandon Graham's going to bring to the table. And sometimes he brings more than you expect. You can't build a defense on Jalen Carter when he's up and down, up and down. It's like the theme of this team, man. The highs are high and the lows are low.
That's the key to being a great player, consistency. I mean, a lot of guys have top-tier talent in the NFL, but they don't have top-tier consistency. Jalen Carter is in that group. And he can't be in the group that people want him in, and people want to compare him to the best defensive tackles in the game. He can't be in that group until he gains some consistency. So when you're talking about Dexter Lawrence, who's on a bad football team, but these are the guys you're talking. Chris Jones, you saw him. People saw him last night.
Dude, beast.
That is what you're looking for. That is what you're looking for from week to week to week, and he's not that. He's got the ceiling of those types of players, but he doesn't have the consistency of those types of players.
Not at all. Let's get to our super chats. We're waiting on Jeff Kerr is going to join us, and then we'll have Chris Franklin in hour number 2. I do want to run through these. Big shout out to Brian Garner for becoming a new member today. Brian, thank you for your support of the channel, man. We appreciate that very much. And then Brian also dropped in 2 super chats. Brian, I'm going to get to them in a second. Let's go to our man, Alexander Harris. Drops us $20. Alexander, thank you for your support, man. Appreciate it. He says he's making the same mistakes over, I guess he's speaking about Jalen here, over and over. And even though he was missing his top targets, Paris, Dotson, Ross have played this game, so he shouldn't be this bad. Tom elevated players. Peyton elevated players. Hurts does not. That's the realization, John, that people are having. And I don't think you should compare, anybody.
I wouldn't compare too many to Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. But I get your point. He's not elevating players, but that's a bad group of receivers. I'm sorry. That is a bad group of receivers. And that's a Howie Roseman issue. Now, part of it is, look, you pay so much to the guys who are so good, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, it's hard to and they tried to go a different route and get Jahan Dotson. But again, everybody's spiking the football in that trade. I'm like, be careful. Adam Peter's a smart guy. And, he's willing to give up the guy in the division. That set off, I talked about it the day of the trade. That set off some signs for me. I go, well, what's going on here? And he doesn't look good. I was talking about the college game. If you watch the college game again, if you can get through it, all you see is bubble tunnel, smoke screens, blah, 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 all over and over and over again to the point it's unwatchable to me. But there's so many guys like Jahan Dotson that can make plays in space at the college level. And then they get to the pro level and it's about, Well, you better learn to run a route to get open and to get separation. And if you
Yeah.
can't do that, you're not going to be consistent. Same thing we're talking about with Jalen Carter. You're not going to be a consistently good receiver. And there's so many. I'm not picking on him, but he's clearly not what Eagles fans expected him to be because he was the 16th overall pick in the draft. And then don't even get me started with John Ross hasn't played an NFL game since 2021. Johnny Wilson is a 6th-round pick that can't run in a league where every cornerback can run. And by run, I don't mean run like me, run like an NFL player. You know, there were so many teams thinking about drafting Johnny Wilson, thinking about moving him to tight end for a reason. Now, the Eagles see something different, but they see something different as far as helping the running game,
Right.
maybe the occasional back shoulder throw, maybe a red zone threat on a 50-50 ball, not 70 plays getting open consistently. And if that's what you expect, that's on you as a fan base. And then who am I missing?
Yeah.
I mean,
point proven. I think what's being shattered though, John, is in many Eagles fans' minds, and I'm guilty of it as well. We wanted to believe. Not only did we want to believe, but we thought we saw with our own eyes, and then we were sold, constantly by the team and everybody that this guy was elite. And I think that's the realization.
Jaylen?
Yeah, Jaylen.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if the team does that. He's a very good player.
I just think being a fan of the team,
I think it becomes this out. Look, they made it to the Super Bowl. He outplayed the best player in football on the biggest stage. And, I always talk about the NFL moves quickly. So the minute you think you have it solved, they're going to change. Everybody spent that off season trying to work on what the hell are we going to do with Jaylen Hurts? And they come back and they make adjustments and they make it more difficult. And the adjustments back to that have not been where you wanted to keep him at that level that he was at in the Super Bowl. But he's still a good player. He's still a good player. Is he an elite player? Look, NFL teams don't talk about things that way. So it's not the Eagles calling them elite. Is he an elite quarterback? No. Is he a very good quarterback? Yes. But even that's dependent on my definition and your definition.
Right.
Is elite top 10?
No.
And in my estimation, it's not. To some, it is. And he's kind of a bridge quarterback in, top 10 somewhere. Good season, probably 9, 10. Bad season, probably 11, 12. And I expected a little bit more by this point.
Let's get to real quick. Let's run through these super chats. I want to get to Jeff Kerr. Jeff, thanks for checking in, brother. I see you in the green room. We'll get to you in just a second. Brian Garner checks in. Jaylen holds the ball too long and doesn't look explosive when running. Also, Kenny Gainwell can't recognize, pick up the blitz. Yeah, I agree with that. But just quick reaction there, John, to Brian. I want to roll through these supers. And then he also said, real quick, so you can answer both at once. I think the league has caught up to Vic's scheme. Also, when Huff is shuffling.
I've been saying that for years. They caught up to that 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But well, first of all, I think people don't realize, and that's one of the strengths of Saquon Barkley as a pass protector. There are very few running backs that pick up.
He is really good at it, Saquon.
Well, and ironically, he missed the block on Levante David, or at least had some troubles where.
Well, that was a creative blitz though from.
Well, it was, but
it looked
that's
like he was
why
bringing pressure on the edges, and then they dropped back, and David came up the middle. That was a good blitz.
Yeah, but that's why the Eagles are kind of taking that one off Jalen Hurts' plate, which, by the way, I don't agree with. But Saquon's much better than most. There are very few backs who are good pass protectors, and yes, Kenny is not one of them. But that's normal. As far as big scheme, I've been talking about it for years. Yeah, I mean, it happens to every scheme. It happened to Tony Dungy, Hall of Fame coach. Happened to Pete Carroll, going to be a Hall of Fame coach. It's happened to Vic. And boy, when he rolls out the nickel, like I said this year, and it's not working. It's not working. And, he's evolved in the past. Hopefully he can evolve again. He needs to start taking better advantage of the talent he does have. Right now, it strikes me as, the square peg in the round hole. He's trying to fit players into what he wants to do. I think he's got to figure out what the players he does have. I think he's got to figure out what they do well.
Let's get to our commercial break. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Great crowd in here this morning. So thank you guys for being in here. Hit that like button. We're going to get to our commercial break. Before I do that, real quick, let me tell you about our great friends at BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. They've launched a new promo you'll see on your screen right now. It's using the code YouTube150. And you get 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit, and then you get 125% on your second and third deposits, all up to $2,000. So you can deposit less and bet with more. BetUS has the fastest payouts in the industry. They have 24/7 customer support, and you'll even get your own custom account manager to help you through any bets or navigate their website if you need. So go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa and use that promo code YouTube150. Bird365, back in 3 minutes.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.